Yo, have y'all ever read Lamentations? Lamentations. It's a very sad book, the Bible. It is, the word Lamentations means passionate expression of sorrow, grief. So what's going on with Lamentations is you got Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is doing what Jerusalem is best at back in biblical times, and that is ignore God. All right? God would bless them and bless them. God would warn them, hey, don't forget about me, okay? And then they would forget about God. And then they would sin, and then more prophets would come and tell Jerusalem, look, you need to get it together, okay? You need to get it together, because if not, destruction's coming. And then the Israelites would not listen to God again, and then destruction would come. And this cycle continues in the Old Testament. So Lamentations is one of these real low points with Jerusalem, not listening to God, not listening to the prophets, and now they're desolate. It's real bad, real bad. That's where we find ourselves with Lamentations. Now, some people can relate to this book. Some people personally can relate to being in a season where you feel like nothing's going right, where your whole life just feels bad. Your whole life feels unfruitful. I feel like we've all been in those spots before. And regardless of whether that's the reality of the situation or not, you feel that way, right? Individually, you can feel that way about your family. You can feel your way about that city. I definitely, here in Baltimore, feel that way a lot. Looking at the city, wondering if there's any hope at all for the city. Some people feel that way about our country. Is there any hope at all for our country? You know, we've got what probably will end up being Trump versus Biden. And you look at it, it's like, why can't we do better than this? Like our country is in some problems. That's how some people think. And they might be right. Different situations of life. And you feel hopeless. This is where Lamentations is. And so we get towards the end of Lamentations, with all the rough stuff that's happening. And this is towards the end of it, last chapter, chapter 5, verse 21. It's just a crying out to God, okay? Restore us to yourself, O Lord, that we may return. Renew our days as of old. Read that again. Restore us to yourself, O Lord, that we may return. Renew our days as of old. Restore us. So it's a crying out to God because there's nothing that they can do. All right, they've exhausted everything that they can do. They've cried out, they've prayed. It doesn't seem like anything's working. And they're just, all they can do at this point is to continue to cry out. And they're crying out to God that they will be restored to God. That's different than asking for something specific that you want God to do. You got to that point where everything's just so messed up, you just need God himself to come and give you a hug and just bring himself to you. And that's what they're crying out for. And hope that God will restore them simply with himself. And that's what we really need, isn't it? All the time. But especially in those moments where we feel like everything is wrong. It's like, you could give a homeless person money. And they might be blessed by that money, right? But just giving them a few bucks is not going to restore them. They need a whole lot more than just a few bucks. They need a whole lot more than simply money. They need direction. They need to get into a certain place in life where they can be restored, a certain mentality where their whole life, everything within them and flowing out of them can be restored. This is what we're talking about. We're not talking about just a little something from God. We need all of God. And that's what the people here are crying out for. And that's what we need to do. Really all the time, but especially in those times where we throw our hands up like, I don't know what else to do. You know, looking around, I've done everything that I can actually do. I don't know what else to do. And especially people in those times where we've messed up. We have sinned, we have ignored God, and as a result of that, everything's messed up. So there's different times, right? Sometimes things get messed up just because of life. Sometimes things get messed up because of a mistake here and there by ourselves or someone else. And other times it's gross sin. Gross negligence on our part or someone else's part that has gotten us to this point. And regardless, people, we need to cry out for God himself. We need Christ to come give us that hug. Amen? Something to remember.